Imagine a de-identified clinical scene. A child undergoing in-center hemodialysis suddenly develops symptomatic hypertension midway through their scheduled session. They were previously stable, but now their blood pressure has plummeted and they are feeling lightheaded. The alarms on the dialysis machine begin to sound. The team rushes to the bedside to evaluate the patient. The opening question you must answer is this: what immediate interventions address the underlying physiology of this intradialytic emergency? Do you know the conceptual steps to restore intravascular volume without causing further harm? By the end of this episode, you will have a clear framework to recognize and manage dialysis complications, from vascular access issues to life-threatening intradialytic emergencies. Let us reorient the cold open data around intradialytic physiology. Hemodialysis involves the rapid removal of fluid and solutes from the intravascular space. The rate at which fluid is removed is known as the ultrafiltration rate. Meanwhile, fluid from the interstitial space shifts back into the intravascular space to maintain volume. This is the plasma refilling rate. Intradialytic emergencies often occur when these two rates are mismatched. If the ultrafiltration rate significantly exceeds the plasma refilling rate, the intravascular space becomes depleted. This mismatch leads to acute hypovolemia during the dialysis session. The patient in our cold open is experiencing the direct clinical consequence of this mismatch. Understanding this balance is the key to managing fluid shifts safely and preventing complications during a hemodialysis treatment. Intradialytic hypertension is primarily driven by this exact mismatch, where the ultrafiltration rate exceeds the plasma refilling rate. This leads to profound hypovolemia and symptomatic hypertension. Another major emergency is dialysis disequilibrium syndrome. This condition results from the rapid clearance of solutes, primarily urea, from the intravascular space during dialysis. Because urea is cleared from the blood faster than it is from the brain, a transient osmotic gradient is created. This gradient shifts water into the brain tissue, leading to cerebral edema. Clinically, this presents with neurological symptoms ranging from headache and nausea to seizures and coma. Both of these conditions underscore the dangers of rapid physiologic shifts during dialysis. Recognizing their underlying mechanisms is crucial for board exams and safe clinical practice. We now shift our focus to the lifeline of the hemodialysis patient: vascular access. There are three main types of access used in children. Arteriovenous fistulas, or AVFs, are considered the preferred permanent vascular access. They generally have lower infection rates and longer survival times compared to other options. However, their maturation in children can be challenging due to smaller vessel sizes. Arteriovenous grafts, or AVGs, use a synthetic tube to connect an artery and a vein. Central venous catheters, or CVCs, are often used for acute access or when fistulas and grafts cannot be created. While CVCs provide immediate access without needing time to mature, they carry a significantly higher risk of complications. Understanding these differences is essential for long-term access planning. Vascular access complications are a leading cause of morbidity in pediatric hemodialysis. Access thrombosis is a primary reason for the failure of both arteriovenous fistulas and arteriovenous grafts. The most common underlying cause of this thrombosis is venous stenosis, which gradually narrows the vessel and restricts blood flow. Routine surveillance for stenosis is a critical component of preventative care. This includes clinical flow monitoring and regular physical examinations of the access site. By detecting stenosis early, clinicians can intervene before complete thrombosis occurs. This proactive approach helps to preserve the vascular access and extends its functional lifespan. Recognizing the relationship between stenosis and thrombosis is a key principle for maintaining the lifeline of a hemodialysis patient. Infections represent another major complication, particularly for patients utilizing central venous catheters. These catheters carry a significantly higher risk of central line-associated bloodstream infections, or CLABSI, compared to arteriovenous fistulas or grafts. When a CLABSI is suspected, accurate diagnosis is critical. The diagnostic criteria require blood cultures drawn directly from the dialysis catheter. Ideally, these should be paired with peripheral blood cultures if feasible, to definitively establish the catheter as the source of the infection. Treatment of these catheter-associated infections often requires systemic antibiotics. Depending on the specific pathogen isolated and the patient's clinical status, management may also involve the use of antibiotic locks or the complete removal of the infected catheter. When acute access failure occurs, rapid triage and management are essential to ensure the patient continues to receive life-sustaining dialysis. Acute failure usually presents as a sudden loss of thrill or bruit in a fistula or graft, or an inability to draw blood from a central venous catheter. The immediate priority is to identify the cause, which is frequently a thrombotic event. Diagnostic imaging, such as Doppler ultrasound or angiography, is often utilized to locate the exact site of the obstruction. Interventions may include pharmacological thrombolysis or surgical thrombectomy to restore patency. If the existing access cannot be salvaged promptly, the placement of a temporary central venous catheter may be required to bridge the patient until a permanent solution is established. Beyond hypertension and disequilibrium, there are rare but catastrophic non-infectious emergencies to recognize. An air embolism occurs when air enters the extracorporeal circuit and travels into the patient's venous system. This requires immediate cessation of dialysis, clamping of the venous line, and placing the patient in a left lateral decubitus Trendelenburg position to trap the air in the right ventricle. Intradialytic hemolysis is another severe complication. It can present with acute back pain, chest pain, or dark blood in the dialysis tubing. Common causes include exposure to chloramines in the water supply, overheated dialysate, or mechanical shear stress from the blood pump. Both emergencies require rapid identification and immediate cessation of the dialysis treatment to prevent fatal outcomes. Let us return to the cold open. The child has developed symptomatic hypertension midway through their dialysis session. Your immediate interventions must address the underlying hypovolemia caused by the mismatched fluid shifts. The initial management includes stopping the ultrafiltration immediately to halt further volume loss. Next, place the patient in the Trendelenburg position to facilitate venous return to the heart and improve cardiac output. Finally, administer an isotonic fluid bolus to rapidly restore intravascular volume. This structured approach directly counters the physiologic insult. We deliberately avoid memorizing specific numerical bolus volumes, as those require patient-specific contexts and current guideline reviews. Instead, focus on these conceptual steps that quickly and safely reverse the intradialytic emergency. We conclude with 5 board pearls. 1. Intradialytic hypertension is driven by an ultrafiltration rate that exceeds the plasma refilling rate. 2. Dialysis disequilibrium syndrome is caused by an osmotic gradient from rapid urea clearance, leading to cerebral edema. 3. Arteriovenous fistulas are the preferred permanent vascular access due to lower infection rates. 4. Central venous catheters have a significantly higher risk of central line-associated bloodstream infections. 5. Air embolism requires stopping dialysis and placing the patient in the left lateral decubitus Trendelenburg position. This episode covered hemodialysis complications, vascular access, and emergencies. Peritoneal dialysis prescription and its complications are discussed in EP30, while continuous renal replacement therapy is covered in EP32.